Hi there, I'm Kirk Newcombe, founder and managing partner of Timberwind Capital Partners. Timberwind is a fund tailored to acquire and operate one business where the current owners are looking to step away, knowing that their company is in good hands. There's a community of entrepreneurs like my guest today, Jackie, who shied away from traditional corporate careers with the goal of buying and operating a company. In my experience, business owners are only finding it harder to differentiate between the seasoned investors, the tire kickers, the smart money, and their inboxes are literally overflowing with requests for an introductory call. So today's conversation is really an experiment. I've only met incredibly accomplished, passionate, dedicated people who are really committed to moving across the country, bringing their families and their spouses to run a heating and ventilation business, a software company, or a roadside assistant provider. And so in a world that's only getting noisier, their individual stories, I think, are the greatest differentiator when it comes to the legacy of someone's business, who they are, what they represent, what they want to do, and how they carry somebody's legacy forward. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jackie Kopcho. She is managing partner of Big Branch Capital, based out in New York City. Jackie founded Big Branch in 2019 with a similar goal. She wants to acquire a small or medium-sized company, relocate if necessary, and transition into a full-time leadership role. Jackie and I have known each other for a couple of years now. We share some investors in common, and we commiserate on occasion over a cocktail, and now over Zoom, not with cocktails. So Jackie, I'll turn it over to you. Perhaps you can introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you.
Great. Kirk, thank you so much for the introduction. And we definitely need to get together soon for a cocktail or two or three. But I'll give you some information on myself and my background. I come from a family of entrepreneurs and business owners. I've worked since I was 11 years old at my grandparents' pizzeria in the South Bronx, from cutting cheese to serving customers to doing a lot of dishes. From there, worked through high school at restaurants. Finally, in university, I was waitressing because I think it's a good skill there.
And an
Was
honorable
offered,
profession.
it's amazing, but the people I meet, and it's always very serendipitous. But I was offered a role at an institutional investor, which is a multinational company, because I couldn't stop laughing on a Saturday night, and the guy was talking to me and he invited me for an interview. So went for the interview, really kicked off my professional career of writing content, dealing with C-suite, dealing with executive assistants who had access to the C-suite, just learning how to speak to everybody. Also, at the same time, I was helping my brother and his best friend start a business of theirs, which was a full service brewery and restaurant. So at nighttime and on weekends, I would write the business plan, get the marketing up and going. Left institutional investor to work at a company out in California. It actually gave me a lot of flexibility because every 6 weeks I would go out there, but nights, weekends, I would have time to work on the business plan and the business for my brother and his best friend. Eventually realized that I wanted to see how sausage is made in a few other industries. So took a consulting role. At the same time, went back to business school. And that's where I found out about search funds. So I had coffee with one of the speakers from my classes. Really down to earth, great guy, came from blue collar family. I very much connected with him, and I told him my story, and he said, check out this model called search fund. You can go out and buy a business and you could actually run it. And it first sounded like a Ponzi scheme, which I think every searcher first thinks about. It's like, somebody's going to give me money to go out and buy a business, and that's it. But it turned out to be a fantastic opportunity. And I jumped, I think it was 2 days later, I realized that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I jumped in from there.
Okay, that's interesting. So it isn't as simple as that, though, right? It's not, and it's also been many years in the making as well, right? Like, you didn't just wake up one morning and decide that a search fund was a thing, right? Can you maybe share a little bit of the history of search funds, just for folks who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so search funds, they started in, I believe it was 1985, out in Stanford, where entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial students realized that there was a big opportunity to acquire businesses where owners are looking to retire or maybe step down. And there was just this gap. And you did have some kind of private money in play, but this whole model just started because you might know the history a little bit better than I do, but somebody decided somebody wants to sell their business. They don't want to sell to somebody with big money institutional company. They want to sell to a person who will step in and run that business. And that's where search funds really got their start.
100%. And I think too, sort of the important qualification is like people have been buying private businesses and small businesses forever. It's simply that there are businesses of a certain size that were having challenges, were being challenged when it came to trying to sell their business simply because individuals didn't have the capital to do it. So the gentleman Irv Grousbeck at Stanford, who was a professor with his students, said, well, we can organize essentially a fund. We'll bring in some folks with the capital to actually acquire those businesses, and we'll support the execution of that search and really create, to use like an academic term, liquidity for somebody who's got a business of a certain size that would traditionally not be able to sell it because of it's just almost too big in a way. So there have been hundreds of searches raised. You and I are just two of many. It's really transformed into a community. And it's not just a feel-good thing, right? For folks like us and the sellers, it's almost an asset class to itself now. There are tons of incredible successes, and many of you are probably customers of a search fund business, whether you realize it or not. So very exciting in many ways. So thank you. Let's talk a little bit about like why you did a search, right? We understand how you found out about it, but what was compelling about it for you?
Yeah. For me, because of my background where I've worked in a lot of different types of businesses, from financial services to healthcare technology to consumer goods, and doing everything from setting strategy to marketing, public relations, sales, managing employees, managing consumers, the customers. I just always loved the rolling up your sleeve and getting stuff done side of it. So I always knew that I didn't want to go back into a large organization. I very much like being part of a small to medium enterprise where you know where people's strengths are, you know where their weaknesses are, you can give them tools to succeed. I personally can roll up my sleeves and just jump in from strategy to execution. So for me, this just made sense. I was applying for some jobs as operations roles or even for startups to kind of help come in and get things going. But this just appealed to me so much because I was in charge of my future. If I raised this fund and I found a business and I was able to operate it, it was on me and of course help of other people. But if I didn't do it, and I perhaps failed, or I didn't find a company or something, it would also be on me. I was just tired of waiting to get an interview to go in and speak to somebody at a business. So I decided, between my skill sets of having run companies before and understanding the dynamics between white collar workers, blue collar workers, and everybody in between, mixed with my passion and desire to kind of take my future by the reins and do it myself, it made sense. So that's still my very big part of my thesis of why I'm doing this. That definitely hasn't changed. I think that understanding where I can get better and how to be a better leader always changes throughout this process. I'm sure you as well, kind of what you think I thought I was really good at this, but I definitely need work on this and I need to seek out professionals to help me with this. But as an entrepreneur and as a CEO of a business, you need to be self-aware. You can't get away with, oh, I just know everything. So it's kind of working out some kinks before finding a company, which I think is key.
It's key. Okay, so accountability seems like it's something that just personal accountability is like central to this for you. I would say 100% for myself as well. There were things that led to me making a decision to go out and do this, and it was about grabbing the reins and going after it, not fearing the gaps that I have in my skill set, because ultimately they will always be there. but also knowing, and I think this is something that we'll talk about a little bit later, but also standing on the shoulders of giants as well, is folks who've done this before, who are light years ahead of us in their professional journeys, who are also in a place to advise. And that's a really special sort of marriage that we have in this process. Neat. So how long have you been searching for now?
So I have been searching for 15 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you counted in months. All right. Talk to me about sort of how you kind of view the bookends on this process, right? You raise a fund and then you're going to go search, but you can't do that forever. How do you think about that?
So the fundraising process in itself was interesting for me. I've never raised capital before in a professional manner.
Okay.
Never gone on a roadshow. So that was a very heavy bookend, to say the least.
All right.
It was learning how to speak to people, how to tell your story in an interesting way without, right? There's that balance of not being overconfident, but also making sure people know that you know what you're talking about, but you're coachable. So the fundraising was very interesting. And I could talk about kind of speaking with my investors, et cetera. But how I think about this timeline is I'm not thinking about plan B yet. It's not even on my horizon. I am taking every single day for what it is. I get up, I reach out to business owners, I deal with brokers, I connect with my network, wealth managers, lawyers, any single person that deals with a business. And I do it in a very personal way. I think business in general is probably the most personal thing that you could do. So throughout my time of searching in these 15 months, and I say 15 because I started even a little bit before I called the capital.
Okay.
You're creating this network and people are learning how you work, what you do. So will plan B, if hopefully I don't have to get to plan B, but if there is a plan B, I know for a fact I can call 15 to 20 people and say, hey, I'm looking for a job and get offered something. But it's only because you're putting yourself out there, you're being very true and real, and you're showcasing your skills. But no, plan B is off the table right now. We're focusing on the goal to acquire a good company, good company. And with that being said, and I know everybody says it, I would rather not acquire a company than just acquire a bad company that gives me headaches for a few years.
Okay, so we can talk about that. And before that, I think the one thing I remember from my process, some of the advice I got early on is talk to as many people who are in this, whether they're searching or whether they're currently operating, because there are countless people who were in our shoes that now operate a business. And one of the questions that I was asked is, have you burned the boats? And I hadn't raised the money yet, but have you burned the boats? And it's not something that I normally say, but it made sense. It's like, have you given up your job yet? Are you fully committed to this? Because you don't tiptoe into deciding to raise a fund and buy a company. There are tremendous obligations that come with this that are incredibly serious, and opportunity cost, right? You left a really impressive career to go do this. And the excitement is getting into the operating shoes. This is the meat and potatoes beginning end of it, part of it. So you've certainly burned the boats if there's no plan B. And I feel similarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no plan B. Cool. So what are some of the lessons you've learned here in the process?
Oh God. So
very open question.
Yeah, and I'll start with something that is evident even today, right? So when I started the search fund process, so after I had that coffee with the guy who told me about search funds, it was, I think, 3 or 4 days after that I went out to lunch in Brooklyn with current searchers. So went out, asked all the hard questions. From there, by the time I met with my first investor in person, I had already spoken to, I think it was 45 searchers and CEOs. Everybody is going to have a different story. Everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a personal view on whether it's interns or brokers or industry, looking at niches within industries. The same even with investors. So the biggest thing that I learned is you need to take everything with a grain of salt and apply it to yourself. So you will get every piece of insight under the sun, and it's 50-50. 50% say yes, 50% say no. And you can't just take everything as the law, right? You have to apply it to what you're doing. And throughout the process, that's going to change. You need to pivot and shift if things aren't working, or you find something that works better, or you're speaking with another searcher who has a higher success rate on something. It's okay to try, but you need to be able to step back and recognize what's working, what's not working, but also what's working for you. And that's very key, because you don't want to run somebody else's process. Even if they're successful and they already acquired a business, their process might not work for you.
Okay, interesting. So my takeaway from what you just said is that there is something fundamentally different about, say, having a traditional role in a corporation and what you're doing now. And in many ways, I want to believe that your role today and what you're going through is very similar to what it would be like as a CEO. And I think it's what keeps me sane a bit, is I realize that in this process of, I'm literally building a business, creating a function that is helping me to identify a business, but in and of itself, it's highly entrepreneurial. There are the emotional upswings and downswings. There are countless people dispensing advice, and you run it as you see fit. And you have to be confident in that as well.
And it's even with investors. You'll get very different feedback from certain investors. Somebody might like a business, somebody might absolutely hate a business, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to make that decision on if you want to move forward with it. And listen, I have investors, and I decided to do traditional search, which is backed by investors, because
Okay.
I know that I don't have all of the knowledge in every industry. I don't have the deal experience. So I want mentors on my side to help me walk through all of this stuff. So even with them, right, everybody has a little bit of a different perspective on things. So you really need to take everything with a grain of salt, sit down, analyze the big picture. Maybe there's some things that investor, you didn't tell them that they might not know, and make that decision yourself. So yes, the search is very much a trial run for being a CEO, and investors look at it like that. If you can't handle the pressure, or if you constantly make really poor decisions, it does reflect on whether you get funded or not.
Okay. I find myself being forcing myself to be positive, right, all the time, and it's just such an important thing. And actually, I will say as well, I've enjoyed like our chats, because you're high energy. We are on the same plane there, but we energize each other. And there's a handful of folks that, if I'm having one of those days, we're colleagues in a sense, and we're both fighting the good fight.
You have to be. You have a finite period of time to come out here and make an impression on who you are and what you want. If you get up every day miserable that you have to reach out and 15 business owners that day alone are you going to tell you to, get out of my face, or absolutely not, like, don't email me ever again. You got to brush that off, and you got to get up and do it. Right. And my favorite line, and whenever I speak to searchers or prospective searchers, you need to choose your heart. Choose your heart. Or is it going to be hard getting up every day and being told no, and grinding and no until you find that one yes? Or is it going to be hard just to say, you know what, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go back to corporate America. And in 5-10 years, you're going to say, oh, geez, I wish I would have done that. Right. So you got to choose your heart.
I wish. Yeah. And I think you have to get excited about it too. Right. And maybe this is a segue to sort of the next topic that we had on our list, but you have to be excited about learning about new businesses. You have to be excited about meeting new folks and hearing their stories and understanding how they came about, what what they built. So maybe can you kind of share maybe what you've learned about small business owners, right, and their role as an outsider looking in a sense?
Yeah, I'm lucky just because I come from that background, and as well, right? It's your family and their business, right? So I kind of get how business owners think. What I learned though going forward was just, it really was amplified. So with business owners, This isn't just their business where, oh, Monday through Friday and it pays the bills and I got to send my kids to school and I have a second house and whatever, right? This is their babies. I mean, they missed cousin, I'll speak as the Italians, right? Cousins' weddings, baptisms, vacations, who knows, because of this. And they hold that with them, right? So when they speak to people, they want to know that you're going to, for the most part, this is not in general, but most business owners want to know that you're going to take care of this business. You're going to take care of the community. They do drives, they donate, whether it's sponsoring a local baseball team, they want to make sure that your values and their values align, because it's not just a paycheck for them. It's really they created an ecosystem and they're very proud of it. So you need to come in and you need to listen. What do they have to say? What do they keep talking about? Do they keep talking about employees? Do they keep talking about the customers? Do they keep talking about the times they go out and sell? So it's really understanding for each business owner what makes them tick, and using that. And I'm not saying to use it in an artificial type of way where you're just regurgitating it back to them, but if you can connect with what they're saying, it really opens up a ton of doors, and they let their guard down, and they have a much more candid conversation with you.
Okay, that's interesting. And I'm gonna sort of springboard off of that. So we sold our family restaurant, which is our sort of, childhoods. We sold our family restaurant on January 6th, height of a pandemic. And it was a really interesting process because I've been on the buy side, right, looking to engage with these folks, but I've also been working with my parents, who are, it's the entirety of their marriage. 40 years they've been working in an operation like this, and you're at the final sort of days of a 4 month process trying to get this done. And what I've appreciated is just the tremendous amount of trust that it takes from both sides to go get this done. The idea that you can look at some of the minor issues and say, you know what, let's shake hands on this. We're going to figure this out. It's more important that we get to the finish line today. And so I think it's just to highlight and really celebrate what you're talking about, is like, you do want to get to know them. They want to get to know you. And I think that's part of the goal of what we're trying to do today as well, is like, who's Jackie? Right? Because that's key. So
and that is the number one thing. And whenever I speak to business owners and they're like, well, what do you look for in a business? And I said, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that you and I can sit down and have a glass of whiskey and talk about things. Because if I don't feel comfortable, and maybe we don't have the same principles or values, and I don't want to hang out with you in a social setting, then there's a chance that the environment that I step in to run as CEO, there's going to be a very big cultural difference. So for me, that's the number one thing. And that comes with trust. You need to get to know them. You need to, and that's why it's be yourself, because you're going to be running this business and it gets exposed very quickly. And with business owners, from my side, from their side, you could tell quickly who's kind of blowing steam and who's actually a sincere person. So it's trust. It's about the relationship. And I could talk about just with one deal where I was starting to find things out later in the process that it wasn't, what they were saying and what they were doing weren't necessarily aligned. I had to probe in order to find out this key person left 2 weeks ago. Okay, we're months into this deal process. How did I not know about this? So it's things like that. And small things can kill a deal, especially when it comes to trust. So I would say that is the number one thing in any deal. It's trust, and it's trusting your gut. And if those things are okay, then fine, go take a look at the financials and how the business runs. But
okay. Neat. That's neat. I often talk about the Venn diagram of philosophy and valuation. Like, we need to be in a, and there's other overlapping circles, but like, we need to find that overlap on both fronts and see, and that's how you get to the finish line, at least in part. That's neat. So let's talk about what you're looking for, right? Specific to any particular business or an industry, however you kind of want to break that down. You probably have your own mental model.
Yeah. So for me, and like a lot of search funds, it's looking for a privately held company where the owner is perhaps ready to retire. Maybe they just don't want to run the business anymore. They want to have an operations role or a sales role, but they want to stay involved. Where there's a solid team in place that has, for the most part, been running a business, and it's not just the owner as the key man. With the company is historically profitable. I know, in financial terms, we're looking for just about $1 million plus in seller earnings or EBITDA, and so that's kind of on that side. Dynamic wise, like I said, I want to make sure that the owner is somebody that I can trust, that I can rely on, that when they tell me things, I know it's the truth, that there's a team that's excited to be there and they want to stay on for this next chapter. And in terms of industry dynamics, always looking for a growing industry. With my background in healthcare and consumer goods and financial services, it's all on the table. There are certain things that I won't look at, just value wise, like animal testing or things with oil and gas, and that's just me. But I really like the food and beverage space. I think that it's going to continue to grow and change, and it's not necessarily going to go anywhere. I like the field service management space. There's going to be a ton more of small businesses that open, whether you're talking plumbers or HVAC or elevator people that need some technology to make them more efficient, bring collections down from 30 days to 2 minutes. And so those kind of industries where you're assisting a business do better in their business. So B2B services.
Okay, excellent. And this is kind of where you're at today. Do you feel like what you're looking for 15 months in has shifted from what you thought you were looking for at in the first month?
Yeah, I think as a searcher, you need to be prepared to go through industries fairly quickly. You learn if the industry is not good at all to move on. You need to get to know quickly. So I try to do that as fast as possible. So for example, I am a huge animal lover, and if I could do something to work with animals, it's something on my agenda. But I was looking at the veterinary practice management space, and after a few phone calls with some industry people, I realized quickly that this is not necessarily a viable option for a searcher, at least at this time. This was, I think, in the middle of last year. But you have a lot of big companies, you have a lot of startups, and there's not much to buy in between. So yeah, things change. Absolutely. You need to be prepared to continually come up with new industries and learn a lot about them to have valuable conversations.
Okay. And so just to kind of characterize what you portrayed about the veterinary industry or the practice side of it anyways, it sounds to me like you were saying there are a number of very large businesses at the top that are consolidators and a number of very small ones at the bottom, and a bit of a vacuum in the middle. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, like a nice donut. That's what you're getting. You just have that inside that we usually look for that's missing.
Okay.
And I mean, the industry is growing, but it's also on the practice side that a lot of the vets are a little bit older. They are very, very busy, and they don't always have the time to implement and learn this new technology, which is not something I really thought about. I thought there's technology, it's going to make running your business easier. But after speaking to some vets and practitioners, they just said, we're swamped. We literally don't have the time to even try to implement all of this new stuff. So it was a very different perspective that I learned from having conversations with people.
Okay, interesting. So I'm going to share a little anecdote. I did some work in telehealth prior to founding Timberwind. I was helping an early stage startup. They were effectively pre-revenue. They'd raised some money to basically build a virtual telemedicine platform. And conceptually, I'd come in as academically, I'd kind of looked at it and said, this makes a lot of sense. We can increase revenue, decrease time of visits, and it held up on paper. But it wasn't until I got inside the business and my goal was to figure out how we take this to market that I realized that the industry is sort of structured in a certain way that there wasn't necessarily opportunity to help everybody in the same way. And the actual providers, the doctors themselves, are incredibly busy. And so I was fortunate that I spent 3 months on this project and realized, there's some good lessons here. And it's driven my process as well and how I think about deconstructing, say, practice management for veterinarians, which I haven't looked at, but it sounds interesting.
It was, but not for this.
Not for this. Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit, Jackie. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of funded versus unfunded versus searcher versus kind of the independent sponsor, private equity kind of characters out there. In business owners are getting a lot of emails from different people. Where do you and I kind of fit in this landscape? If you can help us understand.
The way that I look at it, for especially funded versus unfunded, the amount of knowledge that my investors have and they're so willing to walk me through scenarios and industries and think about things differently. That is so valuable to me as a searcher, and it's going to be extremely valuable to me as a CEO, because you have a group of people that are behind you, helping you virtually not make mistakes that other people have made. Some of my investors have been in the space for 35 years, since search funds started out in Stanford. And some have already done what I'm trying to do, and they've exited the business. So they've done their fundraising, they did the search, they acquired the business, and then they exited. So with that is knowledge that I can't just retain myself. So there's so many scenarios where having these investors step in and offer their insight it's unmatched. And so for the unfunded side, I'm sure that people have resources, and I can't speak too much to that because I'm not on that side, but I know for a fact that if I need something, or if I have a question, or if I'm looking at an industry, there's always extremely valuable insight to be offered to me, that just makes my ability to make a decision that much better. And in terms of private equity versus searchers, this is something I always tell business owners. You need to know who you're selling to. And the first thing you need to do is decide what you want out of this sale. Do you want to just be part of a bigger organization? Are you just looking to sell your perhaps IP or skilled workforce? But sit down with your partner or whoever it is, if a spouse, kids, and say, after a sale, if X, Y, and Z happens, if my employees are taken care of, they're staying on board, if somebody steps in and understands what I've built and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and I also get a very big paycheck, if those are your three things, you need to figure out which buyer is going to fit into that paradigm, right? Because we've all seen a lot of private equity deals, and sometimes that means not keeping the business open and taking resources out. But for searchers, that's the last thing that we want. We don't want people to leave. We want them to stay on board to help continue build the business, because these businesses, we're not buying broken businesses. We're buying businesses that can just use some additional insight to continue to grow. So you need to know who you're selling to, what have they done in the past, and who's behind them to help that entrepreneur or that buyer make the best decisions once they have acquired the business.
Okay, I like that. I always feel that it is my responsibility to help them understand, yes, who I am, but also who's behind me, what they think and care about, how we're going to get there. I welcome those really hard, the tough questions, and I know you certainly don't pull any punches, and so those are the best possible things you can do. So I think that's a really good takeaway for anybody who's in a position to, let's say, vet you or I as a candidate, is ask those hard questions. I would like to say as well is above and beyond just sort of like the sort of long-term value that, say, comes from experience of these folks who are advising us, is in the near term as well, like you say, not wasting a business owner's time. Like, we can ask a question and say, listen, is this going to be a fit for us or not? And we work together with them very proactively and actively to do that. And that's a commitment I'm ready to make, because your time is valuable, and I don't want to waste mine either. But I want to say as well, I think that there's how do you say, there's value in, and I've lost my train of thought. I can't remember now. There's value in, Yeah, there's value. There's value in having investors also meet with the business owners, right? So Rich Kelly is, I'm a huge fan of his. He's from Search Fund Partners. Rich is a former professional basketball player. He's got the height to prove it. And he is as much a coach as he's become a partner and a friend in this process. But, the stories of Rich going on site, meeting with the business owners, shaking hands and saying, hey, listen, no, I'm somebody with the gray hair and the battle scars to prove it, both in basketball, but also in his professional career in business, that we're serious and we're going to go the distance here. And I think that's part and parcel of all this, just a tremendous backstop on kind of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Very neat. I want to say, I think like the distinction too about sort of funded versus unfunded, there's this notion that it's said, how you say, an inferior route. I think it's different, right? So there are plenty of folks out there that do not have investors behind them in the sense that we do. And probably the distinction there is that the administration of our search, right, has been financed. That means the quality of earnings, the due diligence, the legal fees. We'll spend 5-6 figures on certain parts of this project to go buy a multi-million-dollar business, and it's a very serious exercise. Unfunded searchers don't necessarily have those resources available to them. For a business owner who is really keen to make sure they can get to the finish line, ask those hard questions about that side of things, only because they have to go out and say, socialize this project of theirs and hopefully get the deal funded. Us, we have folks who are actively invested in us in order to go invest in that particular transaction. Yeah, neat. I think that maybe, we're trying to wrap up here slowly, but I think like we're talking about investors. Can you maybe share a little bit about sort of what you looked for in the group that you built? Did you just choose anybody who had boatloads of money, or were you more deliberate about it?
I was very deliberate about my process. The process for me was I had phone calls with pretty much every single investor before I met them in person. So just get to know each other, their process, speak to searchers who are already being supported by them. How do they like to function? What resources do they have? Do they have valuation documents? Do they have legal documents? It's because that's important to me. I'm starting this very new. I want to make sure that I'm able to have some tangible resources that I can use to help me get through the search. But when I met with everybody in person, I didn't accept commitments until I finished my meeting with all of the investors. And I did this for a reason. Number one, I wanted to get to know everyone. And the big part with that is I wanted to make sure that I put together the best team for me. So who has experience here? Who has experience here? How does this fit together and complement maybe my skill sets or my voids? So I can't say all the investors love that when I said, could you let me know if you're willing to work with me? And then I'll eventually get back to you to let you know. But if the answer to them for what they were saying was we're not going to do that, then you're probably not the right partner for me, right? So it's because it's not about just accepting it because you have this big name or whatnot. It's accepting it so we can do well together. And I wanted to make sure that not every single person I had was just finance focused, because that wasn't going to be a benefit to me. I wanted to make sure I had the finance side, the operations side, literally everything, the search side. So everything about the process where I can go to somebody and ask a question. So yes, I was very deliberate in the selection. And part of it too was, do I like this person? And I could say that industry as a whole is just absolutely fantastic. People were so helpful. Even now, I speak to investors all of the time that aren't even in my fund, and they'll offer insight and feedback. So just very happy with my team, and very happy with all of the search investors in general.
That's awesome. Okay, sounds like you're in a good place. I love that. So I think final question. I kind of want to make this sort of the question I ask every searcher, the final one. I would love for you to kind of share, the tough toughest question you get or have gotten you can think about, when a business owner, you get on the phone, it's your first call and they're really putting you on the spot. What's that really tough question that you love to get that that you can just kind of say, hey, listen, this is me?
I would say there's two questions. And the
Okay.
first one that people ask, what are you willing to pay for my business? That's a very tough question when I don't know anything about your, yes, I read online, but I don't know what your financials look like. I don't know what your EBITDA is. I don't know what your recurring revenue. So that tends to happen all the time. They're like, well, what are you going to pay? And it's like, okay, well, let's date for a while and have a conversation. The other tough question that I get, and Kirk, I know we've spoken about this, is why do you think you're qualified to run my business when I am the only person that can ever do this and I can't be replaced? And it's like, okay, point taken, right? But if you're the only person that could run your business, then there's a chance that it's not able to scale without you. So as you grow, are you going to be able to take all of this on? So that's a tough question to answer, because when I look at those, I very much think you're probably not ready to sell. And if you are ready to sell, maybe your business isn't scalable enough for a search and scalable enough for me. So I would say those are few. I get some crazy, ridiculous questions. But those are some of the, and honestly, some of the toughest questions I've ever gotten are from my investors on a deal. They're tough. They want you, right? They don't want you just to buy a company. They really kind of dig down and ask every angle that you could possibly think of. And it makes it for a good thinking exercise.
All right, good. So everybody's testing your conviction, not just business owners.
Everybody tests everything, as they should. I can't blame people for that. You need to ask the hard questions. And if I don't know the answer to something, I say, I don't know the answer, I will get back to you, instead of BSing. Because like I said, people see right through that nonsense. Not only can they see through if I try to lie, but I could see through when they try to feed me something that is just not kosher.
All right. Very cool. So Jackie, how can people reach out to you if they're interested in connecting with you because they feel like you're the absolute, best fit to buy their company?
So they can reach out to me on bigbranchcapital.com. So bigbranchcapital.com. My email is jrkopcho@bigbranchcapital.com. And my phone number is 914-214-4483. Give me a call. And happy to speak to business owners, whether they're thinking about selling or if they want to think about how they can maybe increase their business because they're looking to sell 4 or 5 years down the line. I do have a lot of knowledge on how to do this and happy to help out one way or another.
That's excellent. This is a long journey. We're in this together, and if it's not now, it could be later. And I fully, wholeheartedly agree with you. We're part of a small community, but a growing community, and it's whether you're here or there, you're our neighbor, and very exciting. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And hopefully we can do it again sometime soon. We can share some more stories and maybe even celebrate the success of your acquisition.
I hope so. Over a few martinis, the two of us celebrating both of our acquisitions. So.
All right, I'm ready. I'll drink some bourbon though.
Thanks.
Done.
Kirk.
Thanks, Jackie.